It's a little different. We have to kind of get used to our orientation here, I think, a little bit, but we appreciate you joining us. We are here to talk about our book, Travel Light and Other Explorations. And we thank the library and Tammy Gaskell, the librarian, for hosting us. We appreciate that. And we want to give a special welcome tonight to Tom Fenton, who has come from Vermont to join us. Tom was very helpful for us in putting the book together when we got to the point of publishing the book, and maybe we'll talk more about that later on. So Tammy mentioned our group was called 10 o'clock Wednesday, and that started because that's originally when we used to meet. Of course, COVID changed some of that, but that's okay too. We have been meeting as a group and collaborating together for 3 years at least, I think.
We were younger when we
Oh,
started.
that's, we were definitely younger, definitely. And what we do is meet every 3 weeks, and each of us brings a piece of writing, which we review and critique, talk about creative writing, and I think each of us then kind of reinforces our own literary endeavors as part of what we're doing. So somewhere along the way, we said, we all have stories about travel. And then we started talking about this idea of putting together a book. And then we did it. And it was not that easy. It did not go that smoothly, but we did do it. And the maybe unusual thing about our book is not that there's 4 authors, but that we all write with different genres. So in the book are poems, essays, memoir, and fiction. And also these stories are both literal and virtual travel. So we think that it has something a little unique in that way. And tonight what we'd like to do is we will each share a little piece of one of our pieces. We each have 4 to 5 pieces in the book, and hopefully entice you to want to read more. And from there, we would love to hear from you. So we are going to start tonight. I have the privilege of introducing my friends here, and we're going to start tonight with Gene Aronowitz. Gene is the senior of our group. He's now retired, but Gene has been a Marine Corps reservist, a social service and mental health administrator, a public official, and a management consultant. Aside from this book and 2 others containing memoirs and flash fiction, he is the author or senior author of 6 articles in professional journals and the editor of 5 books and the co-author of another. So Gene has been very busy writing, and tonight he's going to be sharing with us from his memoir in the book called Freedom Ride.
Thanks, Phyllis. I'm going to read part of it, not the whole thing. As I mentioned, it's a memoir called Freedom Ride, The Freedom Ride. I grew up in a racially segregated city without really noticing. I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and when I was 6 years old, my family moved to Wilmington, Delaware. That's where I grew up. About 15% of the 110,000 residents in Wilmington were Black. They lived in their own part of town and went to their own schools. That's just the way things were, and I never questioned why. After graduating high school, I went to all-white Washington College in Chestertown, Maryland. After a year, I transferred to the University of Delaware, which had a few Black students because of a lawsuit, but I have no recollection of having interacted with any of them. But then, after graduating from college in 1960, I moved to New York, one of the most multicultural municipalities in the world, and lived and worked at Henry Street Settlement, an agency on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, committed to social justice and equal opportunity for all. I was asked to accept the egalitarian values being advocated at the integrated New York University Graduate School of Social Work, situated in Greenwich Village, where the lingering declarations of the beatnik generation echoed loudly, and the sensibilities of the 60s resounded with music, art, and above all, ideas of what an enlightened society should look like. This new exposure made me wonder why I had lived so indifferently in my segregated community, even while learning in school about slavery and the widespread practice of lynching. Why I had been so oblivious to the circumstances of being Black in America was a mystery to me. I knew that I needed to change. I was appalled by a shocking and frightening incident that occurred in 1961. 7 Black and 6 white activists on a freedom ride boarded a Greyhound bus in Washington, D.C. and rode through the South to protest segregated bus terminals. When the bus reached Anniston, Alabama, a white mob set it on fire. The activists managed to get off, but once on the street were badly beaten. I wanted to do something dramatic. So in December of that year, I joined approximately 700 activists on a freedom ride to test the willingness of restaurants on Route 40 in northeastern Maryland to serve Black people. I was a little frightened, but with all the media coverage that was expected and all the people involved, I thought I would be relatively safe. I rode with 3 others from my social work school, one of whom was my fiancée. Each car had to have at least 1 Black person aboard. Ours was a tall, slender, handsome, light-skinned Black man in his early 20s. To get to US Route 40, we drove from New York City through Wilmington, my segregated hometown, which I thought was an ironic yet fitting overture to my budding journey. The ride organizers from CORE, that's the Congress on Racial Equality, told us to keep calm and courteous when we entered the restaurants and to avoid conflict. I remember feeling equal proportions of fear, disdain, and excitement at our first encounter. But the proprietor was subdued, polite, as he explained that we could not be served. The second and third restaurants mirrored the first. They seemed to know what to expect from us and perhaps had training in how to respond. It seemed to me that this was a largely choreographed give and take. The day went practically without incident. Newspaper coverage reported that the riders, restaurant owners, and police all got along very well. It took us about 4 hours to cover the 51 miles from Elkton, Maryland to Baltimore. No restaurants agreed to feed us. At the end of our ride, we turned around and headed north. A half hour later, at about 5 o'clock, still in Maryland, we were hungry, and the 4 of us went into a chain restaurant. I was shocked and outraged when the owner said we couldn't eat there. This was real, not some scripted performance. I was hungry, really. I'm going to stop here to give my colleagues a chance to read theirs. This goes on for a few more pages.
Thank you, Jim.
And so I am pleased to introduce Phyllis Carito, who's already been introduced. She's a poet, writer, and educator. She teaches varied writing classes at Columbia Green Community College. Phyllis has recently completed a soon-to-be published novel entitled More Than Making Ends Meet. Other publications include 3 books of poetry, as well as poems and stories in numerous literary journals. Today, she will be sharing part of a story included in our book.
Thank you. So I'm going to be reading from Just the Three of Us, which is a fiction piece, and it's about 17 pages, and I'll probably read about 5 pages of it. It's about a father and son who are traveling to Florida by car, and when they get there, another son who's flying in will meet them. And really, the reason for this story was the thought about how conversations happen that you don't expect sometimes when you're driving in a car with someone. So I glanced to my right, sure that my dad, Jerome, is about to ream me out on my driving, but he is sleeping. His mouth is slightly open and his cheekbone is tapping on the seatbelt stretched along his head and across his shoulder and body. I remember how Dad wouldn't wear a seatbelt for a long time, but now he needs to be strapped in, held onto. He has just completed a full round of chemotherapy and he is visibly weakened by it. My little moment of slack at the wheel and a jerk to get back into lane would have normally had him spitting insults at me. You're such a sissy, Michael. Get control. But now, here I am, driving Dad to our family house in Florida, where he's going to recover. My brother Andrew will meet us there. We'll take turns over the next few months, spending time and checking in on Dad. Dad, we're at a gas stop. Want to go in? Jerome shakes his head and wipes the drool off his chin with the back of his hand. Yeah, give me a minute. He clears his throat. Damn. When we get back into the car, I brace myself, expecting Jerome to demand to drive, but he only says, still good for driving, Michael? Yeah, Dad, a few more hours and we'll stop for the night, okay? Jerome grumbles as he belts in. In my day, we drove right through. No need to rest. Guess it's not my day anymore. I start to say, you'll be fine, but Dad interrupts. Nah, not that. Just that we were strong men, didn't think about getting tired. We had something to do and we did it. Your mother hated it. I'm really surprised by this last comment because conversations with Jerome never include our mother. So many years ago, she took off after a heated argument, which I don't remember so well, but Andrew could tell you word for word, at least the way he remembers it. That's the way Andrew is about things. He sees something in a particular way, and he stands by it, even if the evidence is right in front of him to say it's different. I'm going to leave the car in Florida for Dad and fly back home on Monday after Andrew gets there on Sunday. It seems crazy to us that Dad should go to Florida when both of us are in Massachusetts, and we could be more helpful if he stayed put. Jerome has been unwavering. I need to spend some time in the Florida house. I can't believe he is saying our mother hated driving through to Florida in a day. When was that? And why bring it up? We never talk about Mom. Don't even know how to react or what to ask. Dad is talking again. I seen her through the years. She just wasn't fit, Michael. It was not for her to be a mother. What do you mean, Dad? What about Jenny, your girlfriend? She wasn't a mother to us either. That's different. Your mother was living in a rooming house. She couldn't ever deal with much, couldn't go places, or take care of you boys. He sighed. We got together. Got together? What does that even mean? We didn't even know if she was still alive. She was never in contact with Grandma, or was she? Did Grandma Maureen know? No, no one knew. I probably shouldn't have told you, and don't tell Andrew. How did he go on seeing our mother, but not ever letting us know she was even alive? Never call that woman your mother. I remember he cut Andrew off when he asked if she would come back or where she was. Dad, where do you think Mom is? Do you think she's okay? Never call that woman your mother. But he kept going to her, having some warped relationship with her while he had the looker, as he referred Jenny to us for our family events. Why doesn't he want me to tell Andrew? So they continue to ride. They stay overnight in a hotel. They go on to Florida. They get Andrew from the airport. We go to a cafe for dinner, the three of us. Andrew and Dad are talking sports. We should go over the schedule of when each of us will be here, I say. Calm down, little girl. Shut up, Andrew. Hey, stop it, boys. Andrew, Michael is mad. Let him be. What's going on with you two? Andrew's confused. I just need to get home, I say. I can't do it. I want to say, go ahead, Jerome. Tell your son about his mother, but I can't. I spent so many years closing her out. It hurt me so much. I can't imagine how much it hurt Andrew. Yeah, he's like Dad, but I heard him crying night after she left, after he lost his mother. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you. Okay. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Philip Palladino. Phil enjoys this writing group because he has a lot of stories he still wants to tell, and many more that he enjoys learning about through other writers' stories. A retired guidance counselor from the Chatham School District, Phil was born and raised in Troy, New York, and his memoir, Enjoy What We Have, is a tribute to his late wife, who encouraged him to have fun. That fun has led him to travel and to love anew. Phil will be reading from one of his memoirs, Enigma.
Well, this is part of the fun I have. How about Florida? Beaches, spring baseball, swimming pools, rest and recreation year-round. I really don't get it. Come on down, Greg teased me. It's paradise. I traveled down in March one year. My friend Greg, a wonderful host, gets tickets to a Mets game. They need more practice on this, the final day of spring training. The season will not be kind to the Mets or to the Orioles, their opponents. Both teams struggle at bat and have gaps in the infield that allow bouncing balls to escape to the outfield. A near endless seesaw battle ends hours later. Orioles 11, Mets 7. 4 hours of sun is torturous. And despite a thick layer of sunscreen, the spot on my neck blisters with second-degree burns. We better stay out of the sun, Greg suggests. The pool on the screen in patio beckons. The water is 80 degrees. 2 alligators lie just outside the fence to the pool, waiting to swim with me, to have dinner. I can't feature the possibilities, so I retired to the air-conditioned living room. Let the gators do what they want, as long as I'm not part of their plans. Away from the sun, safe from the gators, the cool living room is a pleasant respite. In the cool of the early morning, I walk the next day. The closest diner is at a shopping center a mile away. Jimmy's, open daily at 6 o'clock, fresh out of fresh pastries when I arrive at 8. Still available English muffins and bottomless cup of coffee. I like that. I hop onto a tall stool that swivels. What you want, dearie? Black coffee and an English. Coming up. The waitress in her pink apron, matching sneakers and cap fills the cup. Sugar? I'm sweet enough, I reply. I sip the coffee while waiting for the muffins. Gray-haired patrons are elbow to elbow in sets of 2, 3, or 5, with narrow lanes between the tables cluttered with aluminum walkers. They take care of each other as they share napkins, pass the syrup, cream and sugar, taste each other's oatmeal or eggs or sausage, move walkers out of the aisle if needed. A lone gray-haired man catches my eye, wants to talk and invites me to sit with him in a booth. I'm Jack, tell me your story, he says. I extend my hand. Phil. The waitress brings the English muffins to the table. Anything else, hon? No, thank you. How about you, sweetie? She says to Jack. I'm okay. And maybe we can talk later. Fat chance, she says with an awkward giggle as she abruptly turns to thwart further engagement. So I begin. I like to walk. I just came about a mile on old Route 5. I had to cross US 1, 8 lanes out there. I barely made it with the walk sign. I had to run. Never walk around here. Too dangerous. What do you mean? People are old. They're drunk. They speed. Don't know how to drive. Never walk around here. I changed the subject. This is Port St. Lucie. I'd like to see the port. Ain't no port around here. Why do they call it a port? Used to be a swamp. Filled it in, built homes. Ain't no port. I'm dangerous. I'm dumbfounded. Too dangerous to walk. No port. I finish my coffee and leave an amount to cover my bill plus a tip so Jack can pay. He even gets half my muffin. Gotta go, I say to Jack. Yeah, don't walk around here. I'm warning you. I wend through the scattered chairs and walkers to the door, and more wary begin the trek back. When the sign flashes walk, I run across US 1, sidestepping the last few cars in the rush hour traffic. On Old Route 5, I hug the side of the road, ready to jump away from every car approaching from either direction. When I joined Greg and Louise for my second breakfast, they listen with amusement as I tell my story about Jack and the description of the drivers. He's right. You probably shouldn't walk on these roads, Greg agrees with a big grin. Walk around the development. It's safe, except for the alligators. I never heard the story about the port before, Louise says as she places the dish in the sink. We drive to the beach, only 15 miles. I noticed paths under the power lines today, I said. It looks like a great place to walk. Don't go there, Greg remonstrated. Wild pigs make those trails. They own the place. They can be mean. After breakfast, I curl up on the couch with an intriguing book, Guide for the Perplexed by Jonathan Levy. I become part of the novel, The Perplexed Part. Drivers, gators, pigs, scorching sun. I count the days before I can travel back to my warm house where I can walk without fear, control the sun with a little more precaution, cool off in my gentle stream, attend a brilliant concert at nearby Tanglewood. Only friendship will bring a wary return trip to Florida.
Al Stumph is our fourth member, and you know what they say, save the best for last. Al was born near Indianapolis, and he settled in New York after marrying Kathy over 50 years ago and embarking on a career in social services. In 2001, Kathy opened an antique store in Chatham, and Al left the world of employment to help in the store, to open a lawn care business, and to produce and sell custom-built wood furniture. Al still found time to write essays, poems, memoir, and fiction, which have been published in newspapers as well as professional and literary journals. Al will be reading from our title piece, Travel Light.
Thank you, Phyllis. Travel Light is not a memoir, it's an essay. There was a bishop in Newark, New Jersey by the name of John Selby Spong, back in the, I think it was Bishop in Newark in the 90s. And I found him a very fascinating character, but he wrote this: pilgrim people are people on a journey. For that journey, we must travel light. We will take with us our Bible, not as the inerrant word of God, but as a rich and treasured chronicle of our ancestors in faith who were on this journey long before our time. Bishop Spong. For years, I've considered my life a journey. I've enjoyed traveling, literally and figuratively, among people, places, times, and ideas. The joys of questioning and observing, of sharing accomplishments and understanding, but ultimately, the companionship of fellow travelers have all made the journey worthwhile. As Bishop Spong writes, we are pilgrims, celebrating our ancestors' journeys. Their steps flow into and become ours. I doubt that I've adequately considered this fact. My distant ancestors created the lens through which Western culture observes and focuses my questions. They grounded this lens in the Bible and Greek philosophical speculations. Additionally, my more immediate ancestors were American Roman Catholics. They raised me to feel pride in the values of our Constitution and the sacrifices made to ensure my comfort and freedoms. Together, these two traditions have established the vantage points from which I interpret whatever I observe and experience during my pilgrimage. No matter how much I study, learn, question, or change, it's from these foundations that I choose which fork in the road to follow on the path ahead of me. A few weeks ago, I arrived at a fork in the road. I had to choose between a route pursuing some exotic or unproven, perhaps even dangerous medical interventions that might improve my heart condition, or traveling the other path, the one that follows the curves and traverses the hills created by nature taking its own course. I concluded that medical science had little to offer that might significantly improve my health. Choices I then made are likely to bring my journey, my pilgrimage, to its end sooner rather than later. None of us have ever known how long our journeys will be, but we do have some control over the conditions under which we travel. I have chosen to travel light, following a more natural path. I have forsaken the exotic crutches. Now my physical and mental strengths are displaying signs of failing, but ironically, thereby lightening my load. There is peace to be found in acknowledging this. I believe my spiritual growth is strengthened when I face these losses. I accept that I am a minute component of creation. I accept that I have no firm understanding of who or what creation is, or certainly what to expect after death. I do hope, though, that St. Peter agrees with me that I've been a good pilgrim on my journey. Although I cannot begin to grasp why what is, I can look beyond myself and speculate about what might be. I've been fortunate. Perhaps the best of this journey has been the opportunity to choose from among the many opportunities offered by the different forks in the road. My life, my pilgrimage, has been made up of relationships, whether with fellow pilgrims or nature or the divine. I have felt their physical and mystical support. I've been encouraged to continue to grow and employ what creativity I can muster whilst reaching for the end of my pilgrimage. Contrary to the thinking of those who view human life as having no purpose, seeing it only as a lot of protoplasm with an urge to reproduce and continue in being, I say my experience as a pilgrim has been to celebrate relationships, experiences of love and kindness. I've been privileged to embrace my place in nature, to sense the divine in all, and that has been well worth any price paid along the way. That's how I travel light and prepare for any ending to my life's journey.
That's a little taste of each of our stories, and I thank you for listening so nicely. And I have to throw out one more thank you to Pat. She has been taking care of our book table every place we've gone, and we really do appreciate it. And for those of you who are here, you're welcome to go see her if you're interested in getting any books. And for those who are joining us virtually, the book is available on Amazon.com. But what we really would like now is to hear from you. So any questions, any discussion, anything at all? Yes,
How did you come to your story? Was it
my particular story?
Yeah.
Probably because of that thought about how I've driven in cars sometimes with someone and maybe in that encapsulated place when you're kind of caught, you're caught, you can't go anywhere, and somebody starts talking and sometimes revelations happen. And I've thought about that a few times, and so I put these gentlemen in that position.
Yeah, you said that was fiction?
Yes,
How much of it was fiction? I was curious.
that story is fiction.
Oh, it
totally
is,
fiction.
totally.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I have questions for all of you.
Okay, go ahead. What would you like to
Sorry.
ask?
Sorry. Yeah, Gene.
Sure.
I wish I wrote that, what you wrote, because I'm 71 now. I don't know when you are, nothing else. But I identified with it really deep. Sorry.
I'm 85.
And I was gonna ask you guys how you keep from getting emotional when you read them too. Any of you?
Anything on your memoirs? Do you ever feel emotional?
Especially in the memoir.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the one I didn't read, that I've read before, is the story of my grandmother coming to America.
And you get emotional when you read it? Or-
Yeah, because it talks about the hardship of making that. And she was doing it on a prayer, basically.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
her husband was already here.
Uh-huh.
And she had 4 kids and she was pregnant. So,
Way
That-
more, yeah,
It's a
yeah,
lot.
that's hard to do.
yeah. Yeah, it's hard to read too.
Yeah,
I get emotional when I'm on about draft 3 or 4,
Oh, yeah?
but when you get to draft 37, then I get emotional about going on to something else.
Oh, really, really? Oh. Yeah, because I belong to a group and I get very emotional when I read. And I haven't figured out how to keep from doing it.
Practice.
37 drafts.
Yes.
And you mentioned Gene's story, and in the book, there is another story from that time period that you might like, not just 1963 that Al wrote.
Oh. By the way, I lived in Minneapolis for 4 years.
Okay.
Love it. And I'm Catholic. Next Catholic. Are you? You still go to church every Sunday?
No, I don't go to church every Sunday, no.
Is that your question for
I've
Al?
never,
That was a question, yeah.
Well,
I haven't been a good Catholic for some time.
Me either.
Al was an ex-priest. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, I did know that, yeah. I wanted to be, I was signed up for the Latin school. And I was from Indiana,
My brother went to Latin school.
yeah. But I had a summer of 42 that saved me.
Yeah.
You guys understand what I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about?
summer of 42.
Summer,
Yeah.
summer of 42,
So,
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
Yeah.
that.
Oh.
Yeah.
A summer of 42.
Phil, okay.
yeah,
you're referring to the film?
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I remember.
and that, I call it saved me. Anyway, sorry.
Okay, no, thank you for your questions. Do you have anyone else who has a question or comment?
I just want to say something that every time Al reads a travel light, I get emotional.
Oh, yeah?
And, I've been to every one of their readings.
Oh, my God.
And it's a matter of, it's fascinating. They pretty much read the same stories, but I'm hearing it different, everybody's
Oh.
story a little bit differently when I
Huh.
hear it again and again and again, whatever.
I get emotional when I hear Al.
Huh.
I think it's in reading Al's, and I read that before you read today, I was impressed that you were able to share that much in writing or coming and reading to people and whatever. And I'm thankful for that. We all think about forks in the road. We've read poems about them in the past and all that. But as you're aging, all of us that seem to be here, most of us, you know, there are lots of things to really consider as we reach these forks, and I appreciate your sharing that.
Thank you.
And I would say to Phil, whom I knew years ago professionally, in reading your stories in the book, I was pleased to know more about your life. It's different than just talking to someone on the phone about kids that we have in common, et cetera. So that was enjoyable for me to get to know you in a different way.
Good.
And Gene, I never had the experience that you had, but through listening to my husband, who was in the service, he's 85 now, and so was in the service about the time that you were talking about, and being with Black folks in the South, and going into a place and not being able to be served, and being irate himself. I can identify with your story. So, and Phyllis, not from what you read today,
Yes.
but when I read your story about the train, I've done a lot of train travel,
Okay.
and I thought, people are watching me as I'm sitting there, just doing my thing, sewing, reading, looking out the window, whatever. Somebody might be back there evaluating what I'm doing. So I could connect with that one, just that, in fact, that was the first one I read,
Okay.
just because the title hit me.
Right.
But thank you all. I really enjoyed coming. I've not been to a reading before ever. And I came through Phyllis and Pat, but I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that when we chose the title Travel Light, we did so because we all were feeling that Al's story put us all together, like
Mhm.
brought it all together for us. And when we first started working on the book, and Gene can talk a little bit about that process, you have to make all these decisions, one of which is, how are we gonna put the book together? Is it gonna be all Gene's and all, is it gonna be all the poems? You know, how are you going to do that? But as you start to do it is when you realize, at least for me, I realized the strength of having these mixed genres and these mixed stories together.
I wanted to say something about the title.
Okay,
If anybody is gonna get this online from Amazon, make sure you use the full title, Travel, Light, and Other Explorations. Because otherwise you get a bunch of travel lights that they have.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
if you want the book, you gotta have and other explorations. Just remember that.
The other part is you can, if you're on Amazon, you can search for any of us and the book will show up. You go to Amazon and under books, type in Phil Palladino and the book will show up. Along with our other books.
Which are over here.
I'd like to say something about the emotional part of it, though, to get back to your question, because that was so important. The only reason I write is because of feelings, and I'm trying to identify my feelings.
Yeah.
And these people have helped me do that,
Yeah,
which is why I said relationships so often in my piece. If I essentially write for myself, and then if somebody else likes it, that's great.
yeah.
But it's a way of trying at this age to say, okay, that's who I am, that's where I've been,
Yeah.
that's where I'm going. And that's, I can't help but get emotional when I read or look back on some of this stuff. So thank you for asking that.
it's often said that writers write first to understand and then to be understood.
Oh, wow.
Yes. I had a question for you, Phyllis. I don't write fiction. I've never written fiction. So I'm curious how do you develop your story or your characters?
Yeah.
I know that's a really open, kind of vague question, so, but maybe you can pick a few things out of it.
This may sound odd, but sometimes they kind of develop themselves and as the story is going. So for example, in this case, there's a father and two brothers. I knew I wanted to have a male protagonist. So I had to decide, what is their relationship? What is, there's a lot of, for me, there's a lot of back work in my head as far as before the story itself. I want to write them about them in a car and something's going to be, come out that they don't expect. But who are they? How will they react? So I start to just think about who they are as people. And then the character has to become very real to me. I have to know if they have a dog. I have to know if they would get angry if somebody shut the door in front of them. I have to know a lot about them, even though that all won't necessarily be in the story. Does that help? Does that? So
Yeah.
that's-
Yeah.
And
Okay,
I
so-
can stick my 2 cents in. I'm a very good friend of Phyllis's. And there'll be times where she'll write to me in the morning, I had this weird dream, I have to write it down because I
Oh,
think it's
yeah.
gonna be a story. It's gonna be a story. Or, where we took a road trip
Yes,
to North Carolina together. And she pulled out a piece of paper and I'm like, what are you doing? I just had an idea, something came to my head. I just saw something on the side of the road, I gotta write it down, that kind of thing.
Right.
All these little triggers that I'm just driving. I'm making sure the car's on the road, but she's got all the other things going on in her head or getting written down on a piece of paper. So,
Blessing and a curse.
Exactly, it is.
Yes.
Because sometimes those characters are tough. Gene has been writing more flash fiction, which flash fiction is very short fiction, usually 1,000 words or less, and yet should be a complete story.
Oh.
So that's like, you have to, right, you have to be very concise and, but still understand who your characters are.
And the people have to relate to the character.
Right.
So it's a little hard in 1,000 words or less to flesh out an entire personality. But you learn to do it.
You say that people have to relate to the characters?
Sure.
Meaning the reader.
The
The
reader.
reader has to have some connection, whether
Oh,
they
yeah.
say, I don't like this character, I hope they don't get what they want, or that they're really rooting for the character. That's the connection of the written to the reader.
Uh-huh.
I think that's the most important characteristic of a good story, having a believable and provocative character.
The story has to suspend your disbelief. I'm reading fiction, but I've totally forgotten that by the time I've read the story and
Is that harder to do in fiction?
I don't know, I write a
No?
lot of fiction, so for me,
I would think.
that's what I do. Yeah.
What do I know? I'm
That's
just-
what I love about fiction, because you get drawn into the story and you just write with those characters.
I'm trying to learn to write fiction. It's not something I've done a lot of. And what Phyllis is saying about the characters, you get some kind of a sense, I can look around this room and say, there's a guy I'd like to, he's going to be in my story. That frill shirt, how do they come together? How do I do something with those people? How do I begin to describe them? And I'm just playing around with this now, and I don't have any idea. I'm trying to write, say, more fiction, and I'm working on one right now, which a group of people who are in an old folks' home go off to a curmudgeon convention in North Dakota.
I love it.
I don't know where that's going to go, but the characters are fun to work with.
Yeah,
We'll see.
So a lot of it is the dynamic of your character and the conflict they're coming against,
yeah.
right? So you have to be.
Yeah, I always hear that conflict thing and I have no idea what I'm doing. When you guys went to school, did you take creative writing and all that? I didn't either.
I had a career in public service and in management. And when I started writing fiction, it was abysmal. It was just awful because as a manager, you have to be understood.
Yeah.
And especially as a management consultant, if you're not understood, they'll go to somebody else. And so all of my writing professionally was very exact and And I tried to be very exact when I started writing short stories, and it was just terrible.
Yeah,
Because there has to be ambiguity, there has to be,
yeah.
once something is known, they won't get to page 2. You know, so I had to learn how to stop that.
Yeah,
And how well I've done, I don't know. See in the future. But that's the key, you know, to be ambiguous and to keep the person turning the pages.
I never had a course in creative writing, but I also, when I started writing the memoir,
Enjoy what you have.
enjoy what we have. That's my memoir. That's over there. Great mind, sure. When I started writing that, I didn't know how to tell a story, and it was too much telling.
right.
I don't know if I overcame it in the book, but at least I tried to show, don't tell. And now, as I write, I'm still not really great at it, but it works, you know. And I'm also trying to do fiction. And one of the ones that I've enjoyed working on, and I don't know whether I'm finished with it or I'd like to be finished with it, I think. You know, it started out as one day I was riding down the Taconic Parkway and I got into a 40-minute traffic delay. It came up on my little screen, you know. So I said, this will be a great fiction piece. So I started writing about the 45-minute delay. And you know, you throw enough balls up in the air early on and then you have to bring them down.
Yeah.
And that. And it really kind of writes itself after a while, you know. And I brought this story, the second part of that story, to the group here, and they, well, it wasn't that good. They didn't like it that much.
Well, good for you guys for being honest.
Huh?
Good for them for being honest.
Yeah.
Well,
So
you do need good
Oh, yeah.
critics for yourself, because
Yeah,
you have to be able to let go of the pieces that you really don't want to let go of sometimes. So, because you think they're great when you first write them, and then somebody else goes, and you say, maybe I need to think about that again.
well, I guess I'm being critical of my education when I say I was not taught how to write. I was taught how to write for a test. And you know what that is.
Yeah.
Okay, we got the introductory sentence, and then we got the 3 subjects, and then we're gonna talk 1, 2, 3. That's all I ever knew.
I want to thank Tammy and this library and the library in Chatham, where I hang out a lot. Partly because, well, primarily because my education, formal education in the classroom stopped, I don't know, 50, 60 years ago, whenever that was.
Yeah.
And I took some courses, but what's offered in these libraries is fantastic. You know,
Yeah.
like this program, it's a wonderful
Yeah.
time to talk about this.
Yeah.
I belong to a writing group that is part of this library. It's been around for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
The open mic that they have here, these kind of things allow somebody like myself who, you know, says, oh, I'd like to say something about that. If I can find the audience, fine.
Yeah. I think it might have something to do with our age too.
Yeah. So anyways, support your local library.
Well, thank you. Well, I don't know if there were any questions from the virtual group there. Everybody has their mute on, so I guess we're good.
Well, thank you all for coming. And they said we have recorded this, so I will post it. And anybody whose email I have, I will send you it as soon as I have it up. I'm going to stop recording.